starting. Oh, see, now it's live.
I need the link for the Twitter, please.
I don't know if I can get it. Shit. Oh, we're live. I should have said that.
It's okay. I'm gonna swear later.
I have the link up in just the corner where it has the address. Is that the one?
It might be.
You can try it. I don't know if it's like my own or if it's to watch, but this is the link that I see, and a link is probably better than no link.
I see that. Let me see. It looks
live now. Here we go.
Oh, no, that's the link to join.
Oh, no, don't share that.
Yes. It looks
live now. Here we go. Sorry, mine's playing us back.
Oh, yeah. Okay. It's confused.
No, that's the link to join.
Oh, no, don't share that.
This is so... oh, God.
Live now.
Ah! Sorry, mine's playing us back.
Oh, so meta.
So bad.
No, don't share that.
Go away. Okay, I shared it on Twitter, so you can just retweet it.
Okay. I'm going to do that.
I mean,
no one... Did you use the hashtag?
No, I just shared it as fast as I could so it would stop repeating us.
I'll retweet it with the hashtag anyway.
Where,
I tweeted it from Amphibian Press.
My dog is already throwing a fit, so this is good. This is great. All right. Dun, dun, dun.
I'm going to share it on Facebook in the group real quick.
All right. Hashtag JBTC Hypnotist. Not Hypnotish.
Hypnotish.
Which is a harder word to spell than I anticipated.
Yeah,
for some reason.
Yeah, I can see that.
All right.
All right. So let's get this show on the road. Except I don't know where we are. There we are. Okay. So is it on me? Yes. Okay. So we are judging by the cover, the book group from Amphibian Press. And today we're going to talk about Amy's pick, The Hypnotist Love Story by Liane Moriarty. If you're new to us, I write fiction under the name Cameron J. Quinn. I write the Starsborough Chronicles, and I have an upcoming paranormal romance series. And this is Sarah. She writes under the name V.S. Holmes. She writes epic fantasy, Reforged, and the Nell Bentley books, which are science fiction and lesbians in space. Always great. And then we have Amy. She is new to our group. She is coming out with Fingerprinted Hearts and is the author of Untold. Amy Spitzvaden. Sorry, she writes under her regular name, so I forgot. You might not know it. All right, Amy, I'm going to let you take it away with why you chose The Hypnotist Love Story.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us. So Liane Moriarty is one of my favorite authors. I read her first book, The Husband's Secret, I think 2 years ago, and since then I've read a bunch of her other stuff. I don't know if any of you are familiar with the TV series Big Little Lies, but she is the author of that book. And so I chose The Hypnotist Love Story because, well, A, it's one of the only remaining ones of her that I hadn't read yet. And B, I was really interested in the element of hypnotism, and they address, and well, kind of the center of this book is that her love interest has a stalker. And that was sort of a premise that I trusted Liane Moriarty to address well. And I think that that's not always the truth, but I've read a lot of Liane Moriarty, and she can address very serious topics in both a lighthearted way and also very serious and real way. So that was why I wanted to read this book. And it's also, I find, just very readable. And I love her writing style. And I love how You know, she does kind of write women's fiction, kind of sometimes almost bordering on chick lit, but I mean, I shouldn't say but. There's so much more to it than that. And I feel like a lot of the time books toward women get a rep for being less serious or addressing like real topics. And it has to be more like, oh, either like literary or in a more like, you know, different kind of genre. And this is, you know, it's a treat for me to read. It doesn't feel like a task. And it's still just like the premises are so interesting and the topics that they cover are so intense. So yeah, that was the reason why I chose it.
Okay, Sarah, do you want to go next or should I?
I can go next. So I do think definitely that women's fiction and chick lit even more, tends to get this bad rap of like, well, it's just, you know, superficial topics or whatever. I haven't read a whole lot of women's fiction or chick lit, but I have read several books of it. I've never read Liane Moriarty, so this was sort of a different take for me. Full disclosure, I identified a little bit more with at least the plot of this book than maybe the average reader. I had a stalker when I was planning my first wedding. And so I had to deal with a lot of some of the similar issues, though it's very different, I think, in Australia, or at least judging by this book. It's very different than how the US handles such things.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I had sort of a different take because of that. I didn't love the book, and maybe it's because of my history. I have little notes. So I did like the stalker Saskia's development over the course of the book. The whole like first person, third person switching off and on threw me a little bit because the blurb read as Ellen being the main character, and in a lot of ways I think she is. So it was strange to have a point of view character who was written in first person who wasn't the main character. But I did really like how that helped show a little bit of like, oh, look, normal people can be nuts too. So that I liked. There were some like funny scenes and some funny anecdotes, and I liked a lot of the banter between the friends, Ellen and Julia and Melody, the third friend. So that was good. Once I started reading it, I was able to finish it pretty quickly. But I did have some huge issues with how she handled stalking, especially as someone who has been stalked twice and once while planning a wedding. Mm-hmm. So I felt like, as a point of view character, Ellen handled it terribly. Like, at no point was she like really concerned. Like, for God's sake, she ate cookies the woman cooked in her house, but like,
yeah, that was
while pregnant. Like, what the mercy? I won't make you beat me out. Good,
because I don't know how. I'll just be screeching over here.
Yeah. So that was really hard to see, especially because there was a child involved. Mm-hmm. It is really easy to like, oh well, you know, the stalker, like, oh, you know, she's just, you know, being dramatic, and like, oh well, it's not going to be that big of a deal. And I think maybe part of that came from the fact that the stalker was female.
Yeah,
and the stalkee was male.
Yeah,
I think that some of the like sweeping it under the rug came from that, but all bets are off when there's a child involved, mm-hmm. especially when the stalker is female, because like, hello, women cut open other women's stomachs to steal their children. So like, still super dangerous. Mm-hmm. And I felt like, though, I mean, Ellen never really voiced the fact that she like didn't really care that he was being stalked, except from the like, it's interesting perspective. Mm-hmm. I feel like that would have bled through for him. Like, I feel like he would have noticed that she didn't really take it seriously. And his reasons for not taking it seriously while frustrating, were a little bit more understandable. I still think that like it's totally wrong because it's like you have a child, dude. Like I don't care how safe you are, just care about the kid. So that was really frustrating for me, and I felt like maybe the author was trying to do that, like everyone's human and everyone makes mistakes, and this is how someone can get to that point, which I think is important, and I think that like good job for trying to do that. I don't think she did a good job of it. I mean, Sasuke's development was some of the best character development in the story, so that, like, and on that hand, like she did a good job, but yeah, I just that I couldn't with that. So yeah, there was that, and there were some other like sort of sneakily, well, sneaky implies an intention, maybe unintentional, hopefully unintentional, offensive things like the lesbian commune and like, oh, I'm just going to hypnotize your infertility away, that were sort of squicky. But I mean, it is from Ellen's point of view, so I think that can just be written off as like she's not the nicest person, because she really isn't.
No.
She's awful. She's like such a person. Like I can't. I mean, like we all have like really shitty thoughts about people sometimes. Like, duh. But I don't think, I would hope most of us don't have that many that often. So yeah, those were sort of my biggest issues with it. I did read the acknowledgments to sort of see what research she did. And to be fair, Australia maybe is a totally different place when it comes to stalking and stalking laws, but not the psychology of it or the danger of it. She did a lot of research on hypnotism, which I thought was great. And that was really interesting to read about, especially from like a more clinical side, as opposed to like the, mystical woman side of things. But I felt like she should have done more research on stalking. There was one reference that she used, and it was from, I think, 96 or maybe 98, I can't remember. And this book was written in 2011, and I promise you that there are better studies and more studies that have come out since then. So I feel like she could have done a better job at that. And I think maybe in her attempt to keep it lighthearted, like Amy said, doing that like humor but also serious thing, I think she might have done it too much when it came to the actual serious topics. So yeah, that was sort of my take. I did really like all the different characters she had. She had people from all sort of different backgrounds, and that was fun. And it was fun to watch the family interactions, especially this whole blended family thing, which, is neat to see in a genre that is usually like, you get your one happily ever after and that's it. It was nice to see that. And yeah, so I think that sums up my word vomit.
Okay, so sorry, my hair's frizzy. And I didn't know until I clicked on me. But anyway, so I didn't hate the book. I kind of feel indifferent about it in a lot of ways. My issues with it were mostly from the story structure perspective, because that's what I've been studying, and I couldn't relate to Ellen because she was so
awful,
insecure, and she was also really wishy-washy. Like she'd have a thought and then she'd be like, oh, I don't think like that. It's like, well, you just did. But I didn't like how insecure she and all the characters seemed. Like all the female characters were defined by men. Even Ellen's mom, Anne, like acted like she's supposed to be this, empowered woman who doesn't need a man, but really she was just hurt that she couldn't have a relationship with the one she wanted. And I felt like that, like having gone through being really insecure and having low self-esteem and getting over it before, like I'm 27, so Am I 27 or am I 28? Anybody?
You're 28. We're both 28.
Okay. 28. Sorry.
Amy's 27.
Yes.
Anyway, having worked through that by 28, hearing about like every woman that she interacted with having this issue, and they're in their 30s, 40s, and 60s, it was kind of heartbreaking to see that. So, and I was frustrated because Ellen is almost this really empowered woman, but then she's not. I don't know. I couldn't connect with any of the characters, so it made it difficult for me to read. And I had a really hard time with, and you have to tell me if her other books are like this or not, Amy, but where she would skip an event and then have the main character tell you about it.
Important events.
Like, okay, for example, the first 6 pages she talks about their day rather than just showing the day. She has them at dinner and then she talks about the day, which was frustrating. But once I got through it, I thought, okay, now we're good. But the first chapter ends with her and Patrick being intimate, and she skips it, and that's fine. You know, you want to close the door, that's your decision. But then the next day she has Ellen walking on the beach thinking about being intimate with Patrick.
Events are kind of weird in Liane Moriarty books. Because, for example, Big Little Lies starts with an event at a school trivia night and then flashes back 6 months, and then it's the lead up to the event, and like
right, but like
another one, a big event, and Truly Madly Guilty, a big event happens before the book, and then it's like flashes back, like, and so you don't find out what the event is. So I can't really remember the little events. I can only remember like how she handles the big events. So I can't really tell you if that's a usual thing for her to do or not.
Well, I think the thing about like, because there's flashbacks, but then there's also just like, I'm gonna I'm gonna hear this scene with her talking to her friends about it, like when she met her father, which is like, you need to show that scene. That's important.
Yeah.
Or just cut the dad out.
Yeah, I don't think she usually does that. I think that was unique to this book.
Okay, so how I felt reading this book was, I don't know if she's a best-selling author, and I don't know if any of you have followed best-selling authors from like before they were best-selling to after. But a lot of times I find that it's like once they are best-selling, people won't, like editors and people who are supposed to be helping them with structure and content, like don't anymore. Like, I don't know if it's like they won't listen anymore or people are afraid to ask them. That's what it felt like to me, because my favorite author before she was big, her books were better. And then once she hit that best-selling mark, it's like the same book that she used to, like she doesn't do anything new. And it's like, who is not telling you that you're coming up with the same story over and over and over again? Or do you know and nobody cares? Like, I'm not sure what it is, but that's how I felt. Like, I felt like the dad angle for Ellen either needed to be taken out or beefed up. Like it without it in there, it doesn't change the story at all. So,
right.
Yeah.
And I felt like the end tied things together nicely. So a lot of my issues that I had with the book, it was like, oh yay, it's resolved. Like Patrick telling her that like how he really feels about Colleen, and you know, after she passed, it was like everyone put her on a pedestal, you know, and they did have their issues, and I felt like that was handled nicely. And I did understand his hesitancy to get a restraining order, because, or whatever it's called in Australia, because he felt like he was being, you know, mean to Saskia because she basically raised his kid for 3 years. That was another thing that I really didn't like about Patrick, and we didn't get to hear his side of it. So, you know, there's that. But he broke up with her like a month after her mom died. She has no family, and basically tells her, you know, it's over. I don't really love you or whatever. And then when she's ready to talk about it, when she gets, you know, her bearings a little bit and wants to talk about it, he acts like she's crazy, like before she even starts stalking him. So that was frustrating. And from Ellen's perspective, like, open your damn mouth. Okay. She's like, she has all these thoughts, and it's like things that if your relationship's going to work, you need to get that out. And she's like hiding it. So that was frustrating. And it's like, I wanted to hear Patrick's side. So I wanted her to ask him the questions, you know, and we didn't really get to. Depending, like, I don't feel like I wouldn't read Liane Moriarty again. I feel like I would, especially if I could find, like, you know, her debut novel or something. But this particular book, I didn't get into it until about 100 pages in. When Ellen got pregnant, it was like, then I could deal with her, because it's like, you can just tell yourself it's hormones, you know?
Copiously.
And at that point was when she started having the little quips that actually would make me laugh out loud. So it was like, it was more fun to read it at that point. That was the other thing, is like, from a story perspective, I would have started it with Saskia walking over, Patrick proposing, and Ellen telling him, hey, your stalker's over there and I'm pregnant. That's where I would have started the story. And I would have ended it a couple chapters before they ended it. But that's just me. So,
are you done?
Yeah, I was going to ask who was talking so I could put it on you.
Okay. A few things, responses to that, and also just kind of my own thoughts on the book. This actually, I think, this was one of her earlier books. And I think, I'm not sure when she became bestseller, but I think it might have been around The Husband's Secret, which came out after. And Big Little Lies is by far the best one of hers that I've read so far. So if you do want to read another Liane Moriarty, I would suggest Big Little Lies. Have either of you seen the show?
That's the one that they have a sample in the back of the book.
Is it?
I didn't read it yet, but I was gonna.
Yeah, because Big Little Lies is like incredible. Okay, so one thing I guess that concerns me compared with what I thought with what you guys said is I actually really adored the fact that the characters said, you know, all of the like horrible thoughts that I felt like everybody had, but maybe it's just me. Because I feel like there's sort of this idealization around like people and, you know, maybe women too. And it's like, oh, you know, just kind of like move on. That's not an issue, or like this or that. And like, you know, sometimes like you are curious about something weird or flattered by something weird, you know, like I could see if you don't have like a very strong foundation of like understanding the dangers of stalking and mental illness to be like, oh, my boyfriend has a stalker. That's cool. And I feel like most people don't say that. And most people don't like acknowledge that that's a thing that people might think. And so I feel like what this book did really well is kind of just like take all of those things that we pretend aren't thoughts that people have. And yes, it's terrible. And so it kind of like made her a terrible character, but I really found her super relatable because it's not like, you know, oh, I'm not jealous of the dead wife. Like at first it's like, oh, I'm like feeling really good because you're like, oh, I would be like so allowing of this and like that's fine. And then it kind of like does sneak in and then you're like less okay with it and more jealous, but you like know it's not okay to feel jealous about that because like, oh, well, you know, she, and this kind of feeling of like unworthiness in a relationship of like, well, is it kind of just me because she's not here? And like, so I really enjoyed that aspect of the narrative that kind of like made her this terrible person, because I feel like it didn't make her a terrible person. It made her, sorry.
Everybody okay?
Yes, the dog's getting fed. It made her like a real person that nobody admits is being a real person. As for the stalking angle, like I don't know a lot about it myself. And yeah, I don't think that it was really a good stalking story. I think that not a good stalking story, but like a good, you know, focus on that and kind of like the after effects. I think it's, I think a lot of it did have to do with gender in that there's probably, I would imagine, at least the, like, if there's not the feeling that it's less scary when the man is getting stalked and the woman is stalking because of like the physical power difference, I would imagine there's at least the feeling that it should be less scary. So I could imagine Patrick, no matter how scared he was feeling like, oh, well, I'm the man, she's a woman, I broke her heart, you know, she can't really hurt me, kind of like aspect that might make him push it under the rug. But a lot of that was kind of like me putting it on there, and it wasn't really like in the book. So I can't give necessarily the book credit for handling it like that, but that was just kind of my perspective of it. I thought it was really, really important that she went to therapy at the end of the book, and that it kind of like showed it's not like, oh, I'm all better now. Like a huge part of therapy was that really hurt someone. And then when she said I could write him a card to apologize,
I laughed
tongue in
at
cheek.
that. Like, I know it's bad, but I laughed.
The therapist was like, nope.
Yeah.
And then it kind of like made me realize that she can't apologize for this. Her responsibility and her growth from this is realizing that she really hurt and really upset and really, you know, like terrorized and possibly like gave PTSD to this man and this family. And she can't, her role in making amends is basically not. She has to let it go. And she still had that like desire to, you know, the joke to like, I could write a card to apologize. I still felt like she really had the desire to do it. And I thought it was really interesting because as the world is moving toward calling out worse behaviors, which is like so good, I'm really interested in seeing what the next step for the people who do these damaging and hurtful things are. So and the fact that sometimes you can't do anything about it except just acknowledge that was really bad and I have to live with this now. So I just personally like thought that kind of was really interesting. But I completely think that what Sarah's saying is valid about it was very sort of like swept under the rug. Oh, haha, this isn't any real danger. At least from the character of Ellen's point of view, I felt a little bit like the rest of the book kind of knew it was bad, and Ellen sort of just thought it was like an interesting little quirk about her life and Patrick's life. And I thought that kind of when she broke into their home and everything happened was sort of like the realization that it's like, oh no, this is not okay. And everyone kind of had that realization. Another thing I really like, another thing I really like about Liane Moriarty, that you'd have to read several of her books to see, is she is really good at writing children, and she's really good at writing different children. Like, I feel like a lot of authors sort of just have like a child template that they use and then might put like a few different quirks on it.
That isn't even realistic.
Yeah, and like Liane Moriarty like really gets children right. I think almost every one of the books I've read of her has like children in the like 7 to 12-year-old range.
Does she
and
have?
I think so. I imagine she like I think she does. Oh wait, maybe she's dogs. Maybe she's dogs and children. I don't remember. But they're just like in Big Little Lies, there are 4 kind of main 5, 6. There are a lot of main kids, and they're all different people. And the kid in this book, different than him. Kids in the other book, just they're all different characters, like it would be with an adult. And one thing I loved that she just does these like really tiny truths that like I wouldn't think of how to phrase that I really love about her writing. Mm-hmm. Such as when they realize that, you know, the kid, what's the kid's name?
Jack.
When they realized that Jack, you know, had some pain about Saskia leaving and blamed himself and felt it was his fault and was angry at his dad about it and, you know, felt like he lost the marble and everything. And they're like, oh my God, Jack, I'm so sorry. And then Jack goes, it was a really long time ago. And it said like, he stared out over the vast difference between 5 and 8.
Yeah.
And I just like, things like that are what make me really love her as an author. Just kind of the little truths of like how, and you're like, wait, I recognize that. That is true. So, yeah. And I also, really liked, I mean, this is tricky because like, it's not having to like, you know, the stalker aspect. It's good to like, you know, put a face on mental illness and like, you know, what steps you can do to overcome it. Like at the end when she goes to therapy, but like the stalking itself is like such a like terrible thing. I don't know like how relatable we want it to be. But I did think that it was really interesting that there was this feeling of just addressing the feeling of when someone else ends a relationship and you're kind of like left with nothing. And it's sort of like, this isn't fair. Isn't there anything I can do to like make it like better? Don't I like deserve anything? And that's always been kind of a fascinating concept to me, how like, you know, one person can just decide it's over and the other person has no say in it. And that can feel like so just disempowering and crushing and like weird and crazy. And it's sort of like, you know, shouldn't this be like a discussion? Shouldn't we come to a conclusion we both like or something? And it doesn't work like that. So kind of that imbalance was an interesting thing to look at, in my opinion. But I definitely don't think that it was a perfect book. And I was definitely interested to hear Sarah's take with the stalking aspect, because I have not had personal experience with it, but I have seen it secondhand. But I had a lot of, oh, well, that's not the same because, you know, in that situation it was blah, blah. And in this situation it was, you know, whatever. But kind of like hearing Sarah be like, nope, this wasn't a good representation of stalking. I'm kind of like, okay, that's.
I mean, and everyone's stalking experience is going to be different. I mean, that's because everyone involved is different. And I do think that some of the differences in this case were because of the gender flip-flop. And I don't think she could have written this book had the stalker been male, because of the inherent difference in the power dynamic there. And because there's, you know, while Saskia did pose a danger to Patrick, you know, most of the danger she was posing was to his new environment, you know, Ellen and Jack and whatever. And I don't think she could have written the same book, certainly not with a perspective from the male, like from a male stalker, for instance, and had it be played off as, I mean, as well, though I don't think she did it well, but as well as she did it. And like, to be clear, we all have terrible thoughts, Amy. Like, that's not just
I know.
No, that wasn't the issue.
It was more like the frequency and like certain things, certain of the terrible thoughts. Like when she was like, oh, well, that's something a client would think. Like, oh, for God's sakes, you're not better than them. And the fact that she didn't, like, she said she got over stuff, but then like
she clearly wasn't.
The whole climax of the stalking, where, you know, Saskia's in their house and like could have killed Jack, accidentally or not, could have. And even after all that happened, they're watching the documentary or the news or whatever on the couch, and not once does she consider that like Patrick is watching this and having this visceral, probably like triggered response to like, shit, that was my life. Like that, it does feel terrible. And like, A, she didn't think of that, and B, she was identifying with the stalker, even though she had just had her home invaded and her unborn child threatened and like all of this stuff. Like, I think what bothered me the most wasn't so much that, like, you know, she started off as this like really awful person, but there was no character development on her part in that case. The point where like, I didn't give a shit if she ended up with Patrick. Like, I don't care. And like, I feel like in a book where the romance was a titled love story, but like the romance is sort of one of the key aspects of the plot, I should care whether or not they get together. And I didn't. Like, partway through the book when she gets pregnant, I honestly didn't care whether she got an abortion or kept it. And I think when I'm that far into a book, I should at least have an opinion one way or another. And like, yeah, we definitely all have terrible thoughts. Like we're all assholes, I promise. Like, I think when it came to like some of the terrible thoughts, not so much like her being jealous of Colleen. Colleen's the wife.
Yes.
It was more like some of the thoughts she had about Colleen as a person. And I mean, I've been surrounded by death for like most of my life, so I don't know, maybe my take on that is different. And so that could be totally wrong. But I don't know, I felt like sometimes she just took it further than most of us do. Like, we'll have that thought and then be like, or just sit with it for a little bit and then let it go. But I felt like she didn't do that, and that's really where I had the issue with her. Not so much like the fact that she was having bad thoughts, but like what she did with them, I guess. I don't know if that's clear.
Yeah, again, I feel like that's something I relate to. Which is a lot of the time, like if I'll have a really bad thought out of like feeling like jealous or threatened or something like that, there will be immediate self-recrimination for having that thought. And then I'll be like, well, no, because, and then it can kind of cycle for me.
Right.
So it's sort of like nice for me to like see someone else. Cause I hear most of the time people are like, okay, have the thought, let it go. And I'm like, I'm not good at that. So just from a personal perspective, kind of like seeing the cycle of the bad thoughts of like, well, no, this is justified because like, you know, because you feel so bad about like having the thought, especially if you think of yourself as like a very like positive, like non-judgmental person who wants to help people, that, you know, because she's a hypnotist and like she has this kind of positive thinking thing. And like, I relate a bit to that. And then like when you have this, then you're like, oh my God, you know, she's dead. Not that I think bad things about dead people, but like in Ellen's case. And then you're sort of like, well, no, it's okay that I thought this because like this is the circumstance around it, or, oh, well, like she seemed a little like this, or like, and then it sort of goes, and then you feel worse about spiraling. So like the taking it too far is actually something I really like appreciated having looked at, because like I do relate to like getting into these like cycles of just, but I definitely understand other people not liking that. And I understand like that not being a sympathetic thing that makes a good character. So.
Well, you never come off as like a bad person, just so you know. You come off
Ellen
as like,
doesn't either until you're in her head.
That's true.
So, sorry, on that note, I wanted to say, yeah, it wasn't that she was having bad thoughts. My issue was her lack of ownership. Every time she had a bad thought, it was, well, I don't think things like that, or I, you know, I'm not like that, but she kept having them. And it was like if I have a bad thought, my process is, oh, well, that was bitchy. And then I move on, you know, or I'll try to do better. But, you know, I don't like lack of ownership. And I do understand trying to process through it. Like, why am I having these thoughts? But she was like just in denial.
Yeah.
Right.
She didn't have that element. Yeah.
That I didn't really like.
Yeah, she blamed like hormones a lot, and she blamed like, well, not that. Yes, not that hormones.
As a past pregnant person, that part I got.
But a lot of the same things she kind of thought like before and after she got pregnant. When she got pregnant, she was like, "Oh, it's the hormones. Like I don't need to like work on myself or like do therapy or about these things."
But see, her blaming the hormones got me through the book, because I was like, "Yeah, she's just hormonal. She's not really like that."
She was in the beginning, but
denial. But on another note that I wanted to bring up, the difference between the male and female stalker, I felt like because we didn't get Patrick's perspective, we didn't get to see it, but it was pretty clear that he felt, at first I don't think he felt emasculated by it, but when he went to the police and they were like, well, what's she gonna do, I think that was an important thing, and it kind of got glossed over because people don't look at it the same when men are victims of crimes, like any crime, never mind stalking. So, and then at the same time, he's thinking, you know, she was a mother to my child, which she was. And as a mother and a child from a broken home, you know, it was really awful when my dad would bring women home and they would, you know, become part of our life. And then all of a sudden they were gone. And I think it took about 2 women before he was like, wait a minute, this is a bad plan. I'm not going to introduce people to my kids until I know it's serious. And it seemed like Patrick never had that thought until Jack was blaming himself and like angry at him for not treating Saskia like a person. You know, and it's like, you know, what are you doing? Like, think of your kids are people, and anybody who has kids, you can tell like they're way smarter than people give them credit for, which I do think that Jack was he was a good character, and I wish he had had more screen time. And one other thing, sorry, I took notes while you guys were talking. The one stalking issue that I really couldn't get over was multiple times in the story from different people, they said Saskia must really love Patrick. And it's not love at that point. And nobody says it. Like, I thought, you know, I thought at least when Ellen said it to Patrick, he would be like, she doesn't love me. This isn't love. But no, nobody said it. And just once I would have liked that to have been clear, because people do make assumptions and think like that. So that in itself isn't an issue. It's that it wasn't dealt with. Because I don't want someone reading this, you know, thinking, oh, well, I really love this person and I can show them by stalking them or something stupid, you know, like you just have to be careful. And I also don't want someone who's being stalked to hear stuff like this and be like, oh, well, they love me. Cause it's just like in abusive relationships, a lot of times the male or the abuser will say something like, you know, I only do this because I love you, and it's not love. And it's very important that we understand what love is and what it isn't, especially with the amount of weight that we put on love in our society. And that was, I think, all of my notes. So,
yeah, I definitely felt like when your demographic is one of the type of people who is most stalked, like women tend to be stalked more than men. When your demographic is that, like, you do have a responsibility, and like, yeah, we all want to tell the story we want to tell, and like that's valid too. But once you're putting it out into the world as something that is consumable, you need to understand you have a responsibility and take it seriously. And I think that like she probably did try. The fact that she bothered at all.
I'm sure she didn't do it on purpose. I'm sure she didn't do anything on purpose.
Exactly. But I think that, well, and this is where, like, especially now that sensitivity readers are becoming much more understood and widely known and whatever, I think this is a book that could have benefited from one, and it probably could have been fixed, you know, with just, you know, some changes here and there, and in the dialogue even. So, but yeah, and I definitely, you know, I would be interested to hear how it is different in Australia, and how the laws are different. Like, especially when Patrick was like, oh, well, they're not going to take it seriously because she's a woman, which is like true on one side. But then when she said that, like, oh, well, I'm just going to tell them that you hit me and that you did this and you did that, like, the cops aren't going to take that seriously. I promise you, they don't. Like, so you know, that was kind of hard for me to hear. And like, maybe Australia is like super progressive.
As far as I know, domestic violence is a huge issue there.
Yeah, that's kind of my understanding.
That's what I've heard. It's like,
well, I need to say real quick, domestic violence is one of the most complicated issues because you have a willing victim, not actually willing, but like they choose to stay there a lot. And sometimes it's for financial reasons. Sometimes it's for fear. Like, there's multiple reasons, but it's way more complicated than just like cops not listening. Like, sorry, this is a thing for me, but, for police, a domestic violence call is the most dangerous call that they can answer over here. I don't know what it's like in Australia, but it's not so much that I'm sure some police officers don't believe you, but it's not so much that the police officers don't believe you. It's more that they can't help you unless you help them. Like, I've seen it multiple times where the victim could do something about it and they choose not to because they love their abuser. And it's upsetting for a lot of police officers. And I think what happens is they get frustrated for not being able to help people. So, I mean, obviously there are cases where people aren't believed, or like, especially in high profile cases, that can happen a lot. But I just wanted to say that it's not 100% the cop isn't going to believe you. It's so much more complicated than that. It's like a web of issues.
I want you guys to read Big Little Lies so bad. I just like.
I think too, though, and I was mostly talking about how, because it's after the fact, after they've broken up now, like when he goes to the cops, that's what she says she's going to say, which I think is a little bit different than like you're still actively in a relationship together, which was more what I was going off of. Like definitely domestic violence cases are very, very complicated. But like when I went to the judge and to the police officers and whatnot, for my stalking, they told me that, well, you know, he was just hurt because I'd broken up with him.
Ugh.
And that him saying that he wanted to kill me and wanted me dead, and, you know, breaking into my current boyfriend's / future husband's room with a knife wasn't serious enough. And then I was denied a restraining order. So like when it comes to stalking, I really do think people don't take people seriously.
Well, there also weren't a lot of laws until recently over here.
That's true. Yeah, and this was 4.
And it's wicked hard to prove. So
so yeah, I think it was frustrating for me to see like everyone treating it so flippantly. Also with like the going to the cops, like, well, just go to the cops. It's like, yeah, that's not.
Well, you do have to go. You know, you have to go and you have to make a report, because that's 90% of stalking cases. Are you like, you know how she talks about like for 5 seconds Patrick's log that he does?
Yeah. Which is good. Like he should do that. Like thank God he actually thought to.
Yeah, you have to do that if you want to get anything. If you want protection from a stalker, you have to do that, and you have to report every little thing. It sounds ridiculous, and you know the cops might be assholes about it, but you need to do that for your safety.
Yeah. Especially if there are kids involved.
Yeah, well, that's another thing about why I think saying, "Oh, I'll tell them you hit me" was so effective. Is if there's that accusation, they might take Jack away right away. Like even like while they're looking into it, they might put him in a foster family, like just with the accusation. Like there's that. I mean, I don't know how it is in Australia, but here, like that could happen. If
they would go to a grandparent, and if the family was set up the same way.
Yeah. So it would probably be okay, but like that might
still scary.
I know, and you don't know what that kind of thing can do later on. Like if he leaves Jack in a car and someone decides that's bad and calls the cops like that, and then he has the possible like. So I think I can see why that threat, him having a child, I can see why that threat would make it hard to go to the cop, because if you're like, if she says that I hit her and then something happens to upset Jack or like get him taken away from me or like disrupt his life kind of, you know, in any way, I can see why that could hold him back. It shouldn't. And it's not, it was really not good, but I can see how it would be effective.
Yeah. Do you have anything else we want to talk about?
I think I hit all my notes. We all have notes.
Trying to think. I feel like there's going to be stuff later.
The last one, I thought of a million things I wanted to say after.
Oh, I really liked the hypnotism angle of it. I thought that was so interesting. And we haven't really talked too much about that besides, I thought like the ethics of it and like how she like crossed the line a few times and like really crossed the line a few more times. And like, I don't know, the point where she hypnotizes him to move the boxes. Like,
I kind of loved that. Like, I know it's bad, but
I honestly had the thought, like, maybe I should get hypnotized to want to clean.
Right?
Because I'm like, that would be so great if I, like, just felt motivated to do it. Like, geez. And I know hypnotism as a field is something I know very little about. And, like, obviously, well, maybe not obviously, but, like, I in addition to, I think a lot of the population feel a lot of skepticism toward and feel like, you know, I don't know I don't know a lot about it and I feel kind of skeptical toward it. So kind of hearing like her dealing with the bias against it and how much she actually really loved the job and how much she like honestly did feel like she was helping, and kind of like what like the power of suggestion can do. And kind of saying like what she would promise versus what she would kind of imply, you know? Like she would say, oh, like I can't promise to like get rid of your pain, but like I can give you techniques, kind of with like the implication, like I can get rid of your pain kind of thing.
Yeah.
And like the fertility thing too. And like a lot of fertility problems could come down to stress, and dealing with stress and like possibly placebo effect. I don't know a lot about it, but I could imagine like if it's unexplained might have a path toward like your body kind of letting go of whatever it is that's preventing that. But at the same time, again, I don't know. So it's like really interesting to like have this take on it from like somebody who like really loved it and really felt like she was doing good and was good at it, and kind of like the description of her like getting into the flow and like describing a scene for someone and like how good that felt to be in the zone and how she'd kind of get into it too. It was like, I really liked that part of it.
Yeah, it was definitely something really interesting to learn more about, because it's not like you don't really hear about it. It's not even, I mean, maybe there's the daytime talk show kind of level, but that's the extent of it, which she did go into with Danny or whatever his name was. But yeah, it's neat to see it from a more clinical perspective, and it is neat to see how like, especially when portrayed opposite someone who like couldn't control their actions, being like Saskia stalking him. It was neat to see someone who really understood the subconscious, and you know how you do have more control over it than you think you do. And I thought that was a neat dynamic that she worked with.
Another thing about the book that I really liked was how it was called The Hypnotist's Love Story, because it was like Saskia's obsession with the fact that it was the hypnotist's love story. Like it wasn't like, and here's a love story about a hypnotist, which you think it's going to be. You're like, okay, cool. It's like Saskia's obsession. It's like, no, it's the hypnotist's love story. Even at the end, when the therapist is like, if it had been you at the right time, like, you know, if he had been in the right place, then it would have been you. And then she's like, no, it's about them. And I also really thought it was interesting how, I mean, this isn't good in terms of handling a stalking story, and maybe like with something, it might have been better. It might have been a better format with a different kind of emotional issue, rather than stalking. But I thought it was really interesting how the story was kind of just about the two women and what they thought about each other. And Patrick kind of gets like a little bit forgotten and like pushed to the side. And it's like Ellen sort of being really fascinated in Saskia, and Saskia being really fascinated with Ellen. And again, in a stalking story, no, you don't want to push the victim aside because it is about the victim. Mm-hmm. But in another kind of story, in another kind of circumstance, the like addressing the like sexual power struggle over men, when it's like, it's actually not really about the guy, it's about like the two women and how they kind of like do like each other or could like each other. It was like, that was an interesting angle to take. But again, like, you know, not in this situation.
I did find that actually interesting too, that multiple times both women think back and they're like, you know, under different circumstances, I think I could really like this person, which was an interesting way to look at it. But it also kind of pointed out Ellen's lack of understanding of what stalking is. And I felt like the only person who reacted appropriately to the stalking was Ellen's mother. Julia kind of, but she was more fascinated too. But Ellen's mother, where she's like, no. She was the only person I think who reacted properly to it. And I kind of wonder, you know, if I had read this prior to, you know, the stalking becoming like, okay, this is an issue that we need to deal with. It's dangerous in the United States. I wonder how I would have felt about it, or if I would have believed that this was the way to handle it, that it was fine. And I'm dying to know where Australia is in that, or was, I guess, in 2011. This was traditionally published, right?
Yeah.
So it was probably written a couple years before 2011. I'd really like to know where they were at when she wrote the book, just out of curiosity. Who's next?
No one's next. Yeah, so if we have any viewers who have, I don't know, more insight in the Australia perspective, like, please comment.
Yes.
Like, explain it to us.
Let us know.
Yeah.
Amy, do you have anything else you want to add?
Besides, everybody should read Big Little Lies.
I think I might. I'm gonna read.
I'll just like put that as my next book club book, even though I've already read it. Just like slide it into the list.
Next, if we're just gonna read books before you
don't put Harry Potter. I've already read it technically, but I'd have to reread it. And
we have to put Harry Potter.
I just no. It's not that I don't like Harry Potter, but I don't like J.K. Rowling's writing. It's kind of like this. Like,
well, I don't like J.K. Rowling, so I wouldn't do Harry Potter anyways.
Well, don't.
I won't.
That'd be so funny. We all just like put in books that we want to reread, and it becomes just that.
We're doing Pat the Bunny because everyone's read that.
I love Pat the Bunny. That wouldn't take very long to read either.
I even
have another book group tomorrow.
I have a bunny for the prop. It's the Pat bunny. Although it's kind of dirty because it got pushed under the couch, but I could throw it in the washer real quick.
We can talk about like the ethical implications of patting bunnies.
There you go.
Serious, very serious. Yeah. Okay, so if we're done, we can introduce the next book. It's Sarah's pick. It's Girl Heart Girl, and it's a memoir. So Sarah, do you want to talk about it real quick?
Yeah. So I discovered this book a couple years ago. I followed the author Lucy Sutcliffe. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. And her girlfriend Kaylin, they met on Tumblr, and then they had this YouTube channel of the two of them sort of navigating a same-sex long-distance relationship, because Lucy is British and Kaylin is from the US. And I just, like, in that weird, like, voyeuristic thing that YouTube does, I got really fascinated with their relationship, and obviously I identified a little bit because I'm bisexual, so it was like, oh, like, here are these two girls, and they're like conquering the divide of having this long distance relationship, and that's just so cool. And then also the implications of coming out into like sort of different cultures. I thought that was really neat. And so then I found out that Lucy was writing a memoir about the whole thing. And so when we started the book club, I really, it was one of those ones on my to be read list, and it's just like was on there forever. So I'm really excited about it, and I'm really curious what you guys think about it. And yeah.
All right. So once again, he looks so sad. Are you okay, Andy? Sorry. That's Girl Heart Girl by Lucy Sutcliffe. We're not 100% about pronunciation of the last name, so that might be something we should check into.
I think it's Sutcliffe, yeah.
Okay. I'm pretty excited about this book, mostly because I really like memoirs. Like, I don't read enough of them, but I really like them. So, and actually, I think my pick right after this one is also a memoir. Hopefully that's okay.
It's gone or something.
I could switch mine too.
I think it's fine to read two in a row.
Okay, as long as you just don't care. But if you care, if we finish this and we don't want to do another memoir, just let me know. Because I can switch those two. All right, I guess that's it. And we will see you guys next month.
Mm-hmm. Thanks for joining us.
Yes.
Bye.